So it's 10th April editorials of the Hindu. The first one is "The Climate Crisis is Not Gender Neutral," written by Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, a chairperson, MS Swaminathan Research Foundation, Chennai. The climate crisis is not gender neutral. The climate crisis is already here and does not impact everyone equally. Women and girls experience disproportionately high health risks, especially in situations of poverty and due to existing roles responsibilities, and cultural norms. According to the United Nations Development Programme (UNDP), women and children are 14 times more likely than men to die in a disaster. The Supreme Court of India has just ruled that people have a right to be free from the adverse effect of climate change. And the right to a clean environment is already recognized as a fundamental right within the ambit of the right to life. Right to clean environment is already recognized as a fundamental right within the ambit of the right to life. Agriculture is the most important livelihood source for women in India, particularly in rural India. Climate driven crop yield reductions increase food security. No, Climate driven crop yield reductions increase food insecurity, adversely impacting poor households that already suffer higher nutritional deficiencies. Within small and marginal landholding households, while men face social stigma due to unpaid loans, leading to migration, emotional distress, and sometimes even suicide. Women experience higher domestic work burdens, worse health, and greater intimate partner violence. In fact, when compared to districts without droughts in the past 10 years, National Family Health Survey NFHS 4 and 5 data showed that women living in drought prone districts were more underweight, experienced more intimate partner violence, and had a higher prevalence of girls' marriage. For women, the increasing food and nutritional insecurity, work burdens, and income uncertainties lead not only to poor physical health but also impact their mental health and emotional well being. Extreme events and gender based violence. The world is witnessing an increasing frequency of extreme weather events and climate induced natural hazards. A report from the Council on Energy, Environment and Water (CEEW) in 2021 found that 75% of Indian districts are vulnerable to hydromet disasters. Hydromet disasters, that is floods, droughts and cyclones. 75% of Indian districts are vulnerable to hydromet disasters. NFHS 5 data showed that over half of the women and children living in these districts were at risk. Studies are increasingly showing a direct correlation between these natural disasters and gender based violence against women. Also, extreme weather events and subsequent changes in water cycle patterns severely impact access to safe drinking water, which increases the drudgery and reduces time for productive work and health care of women and girls, which increases the drudgery. The past decade has been the hottest ever recorded in human history, and countries such as India are likely to face unprecedented heat waves. Countries like India are likely to face unprecedented heat waves. Prolonged heat is particularly dangerous for pregnant women, increasing the risk of preterm birth and eclampsia. Prolonged heat is particularly dangerous for pregnant women, young children, and the elderly. Similarly, exposure to pollutants in the air affects women's health, causing respiratory and cardiovascular disease, and also the unborn child, impairing its physical and cognitive growth. Impairing its physical and cognitive growth. One of the most worrying aspects of air pollution is its impact on growing brain. Emerging data from the cohort studies in India show that for every 10 micrograms per cubic meter increase in PM 2.5, the risk of lung cancer increases by 9%, the risk of cardiovascular deaths on the same day by 3%, and stroke by 8%. For dementia, the risk increased by 4% for 2 micrograms increase in annual PM 2.55. Of course, not all women are equally at risk, even within the same geographic or agroecological zone. Thus, Though climate change has a distinct gender dimension, there is a need for more evidence on the intersectionalities that make certain subgroups more vulnerable and therefore in need of more protection. That makes certain groups more vulnerable and therefore in need of more protection. Why does climate action need women? Why does climate action need women? Climate action requires 100% of the population if we want to achieve the Paris Agreement goal of limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. At the same time, empowering women means better climate solutions. When provided with the same access to resources as men, women increased their agricultural yields by 20% to 30%. Tribal and rural women, in particular, have been at the forefront of environmental conservation, giving women and women collective, giving women and women collectives the knowledge. Women collectives are like self-help groups and farmer producer organizations. Giving women and women collectives the knowledge, tools, and access to resources would encourage local solutions to emerge. Would encourage local solutions to emerge. Adaptation measures will necessarily Adaptation measures will necessarily be different in rural and urban areas as exposure to heat, air pollution, and access to water and food will vary by context. On heat waves and water shortage, while gaps in India and knowledge need to be filled by more research, there are areas where immediate action is needed. While gaps in data and knowledge need to be filled by more research, there are areas where immediate action is needed. First, we should reduce the impact of prolonged heat on priority groups like outdoor workers, pregnant women, infants, and young children, and the elderly. Data from many Indian cities show that there are excess deaths during the heat wave days, though they may not be recognized as such. Loss of productivity will impact small and large businesses and our economy. Urban local bodies, municipal corporations, and district authorities in all vulnerable districts need to have a plan and provide training and resources to key implementers. Heat wave warnings based on local temperature plus humidity. Heat wave warnings, change of timings for outdoor work and schools, cooling rooms in health facilities, public drinking water facilities, and immediate treatment of those with heat stroke will minimize deaths. In addition, urban planning to improve tree cover, minimizing concrete, increasing green blue spaces, and designing houses that is better able to withstand heat are longer term actions. The Mahila Housing Trust in Udaipur showed that painting the roofs of low income houses with reflective white paint reduced temperature by 3 to 4 degrees Celsius and improved quality of life. Painting the roofs of low income houses with reflective white paint reduced indoor temperature by 3 to 4 degrees Celsius and improved quality of life. Water shortage is probably the biggest threat to our very existence and needs concerted social action. Traditionally, India had one of the most advanced systems of rainwater harvesting and storage with a system of ponds and canals. Work done by MS Swaminathan Research Foundation in a few districts of Tamil Nadu showed that using geographic information system, that is GIS, the panchayat could map key water sources, identify vulnerabilities and climate hazards, and develop a local plan to improve water access by directing government schemes and resources working at the village level. Convergence of sectors and services and prioritization of actions can happen most effectively at the village or panchayat levels. Devolution of powers and finances and investing in building the capacity of panchayat and SHG members can be India's way of demonstrating how to build resilience in a community led participatory way. It can be India's way of demonstrating how to build resilience in a community led and participatory way. Finally, a gender lens needs to be applied to all state action plans on climate change. The National Action Plan on Climate Change, that is NAPCC, and the State Action Plan on Climate Change, that is SAPCC, highlight the impacts on women yet often default to portraying them as victims, missing deeper gender dynamics. A review of 28 SAPCs showed a lack of transformative approaches, with only a few recognizing women as agents of change. Recommendations for the ongoing revision of SAPCCs lay stress on the need to move beyond stereotypes, recognize the vulnerabilities of all genders, and implement gender transformative strategies, ensuring a comprehensive and equitable approach to climate adaptation. Instead of being labeled as victims, women can lead the way in climate action. Instead of being labeled as victims, women can lead the way in climate action. Second one is the import restrictions on solar PV cells. What is the approved list of models and manufacturers of solar photovoltaic modules? Why has it re-implemented after being kept in abeyance for 2 years? How did China become a dominant player in the import of solar PV modules? Recent Recent government orders on attempts to increase local sourcing of solar modules to support India's renewables manufacturing ecosystem has been widely reported in the media as import restrictions. This follows the Ministry of New and Renewable Energies March 29 order to re-implement its 2021 notification of an approved list of models and manufacturers of approved list of models and manufacturers of solar photovoltaic modules, also called the ALMM list, approved list of models and manufacturers of photovoltaic list. What is the ALMM list? Why is it being re-implemented? The list the list consists of manufacturers who are eligible for use in government projects, government assisted projects, projects under government schemes and programs, including projects set up for the sale of electricity to the central and state governments. However, this notification was kept in abeyance 2 years after it was issued for the past financial year. While the government did not give an explicit reason for this, it has been reported that it seems from concerns and demands of renewable power producers who had secured sale contracts with the government before these rules were issued. When solar modules and cells were overwhelming imported, when solar modules and cells were overwhelmingly imported from China at highly competitive rates, India's domestic renewable sectors at the time was unlikely to meet the spike in demand for solar power production equipment at rates offered by Chinese manufacturers. How have our policies responded? To address this overdependence, India made three significant efforts over the past 5 years. It began with the notification of the ALMM order in January 2019, approved list of models and manufacturers. But the issue attained center stage in the wake of severe global supply chain disruptions during the COVID-19 pandemic. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman proposed the 19,500 crore PLI scheme in the Union Budget of 2022-3. This was to scale domestic manufacturing of the entire solar supply chain from polysilicon to solar modules. The government also introduced a steep 40% custom duty on PV modules and 25% on PV cells. These duties were hard as solar capacity additions showed, and as writers had reported, developers had quoted aggressively low tariffs to win power purchase contracts based on imports of China equipment that put cost pressure on about 30 gigawatt capacity worth projects. Why is China a leading exporter? In a July report, 2022 report, the International Energy Agency IEA noted that China was the most cost competitive location to manufacture all components of the solar PV supply chains. This is mainly because of the lower cost of power supplied to the industry, the agency observed, as electricity accounts for more than 40% of production costs for polysilicon and almost 20% for ingots and wafers. Electricity accounts for more than 40% of the production costs for polysilicon and almost 20% for ingots and wafers. The IEA also observed that Chinese government policies prioritized solar PV as a strategic sector, and growing domestic demand enabled economies of scale and supported continuous innovation throughout the supply chain. What is the scope for solar in India? The government's ambitious target of 500 gigawatt of installed capacity from non-fossil fuels by 2030 is the main driver to scale solar power in India. India also accounts for the fastest rate of growth for demand of electricity through 2026 among major economies. According to IEA, this is because of a strong economic activity and expanding consumption of products to mitigate extreme weather. Solar power accounted for about one third of all energy generated from renewables between April last year and February this year. The country has an estimated solar power potential of 748 gigawatt. Hence, the potential of solar energy is not fully tapped so far. The potential of solar energy is not fully tapped so far. The government is making efforts to harness the available potential through various schemes and programs, MNRE Minister R.K. Singh said in Parliament last year.